Hello, everyone. This is JJ from KeywordCrypto. Today on the show, we talked to Elena Nadolinski, and she taught us about zero-knowledge proofs, and we discussed privacy in cryptocurrency. We had a little bit of an issue with the audio. We tried to fix it up in the edit. Hopefully, it's not an issue, and you can still enjoy the podcast. As always, follow us on Twitter at KeywordCrypto, at KeywordCryptoJJ. Check out our website, keywordcrypto.com, and our Patreon and all that. Join our community and let us know who you want us to interview next. All right, thanks a lot. So, Elena, I met you through a mutual friend, Jackson Palmer, who has been on this show, and he's a friend of the show. He was one of the creators of Dogecoin, and we met at a party at his house. And Jackson said, you should meet Elena because she knows a lot about crypto. She knows a lot about Bitcoin, and she's kind of a privacy expert. I think those were his words. And we started talking, and it was kind of funny because I was, you asked me about the podcast I was doing, and I started talking about one of the guests that we had on. I think we were talking about miners taking fees or something, and I was trying to explain how it worked, and you kind of stopped me and said, actually, no, that's not how it works. And then you went off and you explained in perfect detail exactly how incentivizing miners worked. And I was like, maybe we should just get this woman on the podcast and let her just talk. So first off, I just want to say, you want to tell us a little bit about you and what Beanstalk is, because we couldn't find very much information on the internet.
We kind of poked fun at you in the last episode that we looked for you, and all we could find was a blank page asking for our information.
Yeah, right.
It's a really
asking
good point.
for our private info.
It's a hilarious point. Yeah, our website is just a landing page right now, so I do apologize for that. Eventually, we're going to publish a lot more content, but yeah. So to answer your previous question, give you a bit more background. So I used to be a software engineer at Airbnb, and then 2017 happened, and crypto happened, and I remember going to a dinner at a friend's house, and I got to this dinner, and everybody there was talking about Ethereum. And I didn't even know what it was. This was like mid 2017. And then, on the right back, I'm like Googling on the phone, like, what is Ethereum? And it turned out that the friend that I went to have dinner with, his name is Juan. He has a company called Protocol Labs. They recently did Filecoin, or they're known for doing Filecoin. And I was kind of just amazed at this space in general, and very shortly afterwards, ETH Waterloo happened. So ETH Waterloo is part of the ETH Global Hackathon series, and that was the first kind of Ethereum-specific hackathon that happened, and it happened at University of Waterloo. And I remember having a conversation with someone, and they said, look, like, if you're remotely interested about crypto, you should go there, because everyone in the industry is going to be there. And so kind of on a whim, I bought a ticket to Toronto, went to this hackathon, and sure enough, so many early people kind of in the space were there. So the story that I like to use is I'm at this hackathon, it's 4 a.m., I'm trying to get MetaMask to compile or to work with my project, and MetaMask is like a Ethereum Chrome plugin, and it doesn't work. And eventually I ask somebody for help, and they don't know how to help me. And then they say, look, I don't know how to help you, but you should ask Dan Finlay, who wrote MetaMask, because he's sitting right behind you. And so I literally do a 180 in my chair, and I get to talk to the person who wrote MetaMask, and he's helping me debug the tool at 4 a.m. in the morning. Anyway, so my takeaway from that was wow, this community is amazing. It's so welcoming and so open. But also a lot of this is extremely new. There are so many bad practices that I'm seeing developers do. And I kind of decided to pursue it further, and get more involved. And so I started doing workshops and tutorials, for how to write smart contracts. And then it kind of dominoed. So that's kind of how I got into crypto.
That's pretty amazing.
So you were a software engineer, Airbnb, then you just fell into the crypto black hole, basically, that happens to all of us, but it happened to you in a very particular way, and that sounds really cool. So, so then, did you fall in love with Ethereum? Then did you immediately start, building smart contracts and decentralized applications, or?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. So I went to another hackathon. I got to know more people. And at the moment, or at that time, I was more interested in non-fungible tokens, mostly because it's very easy to explain to people what they are, because CryptoKitties came out. It was kind of a unique example of how, like, showing developers or people that you can actually put, like, custom assets on Ethereum. So you can make your own, like, playing cards or whatever it is and actually, like, put it on Ethereum. So my first project at ETH Waterloo was decentralized video streaming. So basically, like, the ability to take any video file and put it on IPFS, which is a decentralized storage layer, and then have the video play, and then, like, you can donate to the video such that it has funds to kind of fund itself. And what I realized was that the storage layer can be decentralized. We have IPFS as one of the projects. The payment layer is obviously decentralized, but the one layer that wasn't is the computation layer. So basically, how do you do the video transcoding? And it's actually a very computationally difficult process. And so for my project, that was done on AWS. And so I actually got into the rabbit hole of this question of how do you do verifiable computation, meaning that can you actually have this distributed network of nodes that and they do, like, very complex computation, transcoding, for example, and then how do you, as a consumer of that, are satisfied that the output they did is correct? Does that make sense, firstly?
Sure.
Yeah. You're touching on a lot of things that I want to talk more about, but I also I like what you're saying, so keep going.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, verifiable compute is like the problem of, like, let's say JJ, you are a computer, and I give you a task, and the task is for you to sum two numbers together, and then I give you a task to do, which is I want you to add 2 + 3 together. And you add 2 + 3 to get together, and then you give me the answer 6. So how can I, like, in very little time and without the doing computation myself, how do I know if the answer you gave me is correct or not correct? And so then if you think about it, like, let's replace the 2 + 3 or the problem of summation to something more complex like video transcoding, and then the problem becomes, like, very difficult. Like if you transcode a video and give me an output, how do I know that it's correct? Anyway, so this is actually a very interesting problem, and there are a lot of teams at the time that were working on it. TrueBit was one of them, and I got to talk to them. And by, after talking to a lot of people, I kind of stumbled upon this tech called zero-knowledge proofs. And it's a type of cryptography that basically allows you to prove honest computation. So then if we go back to the example of, there's a problem of, like, 2 + 3, what is the output? So now JJ will basically give me 2 + 3 = 5. So he would give me the answer 5. And then additionally, he would give me this zero-knowledge proof that I can run to basically to satisfy that 5 is indeed the answer because you've done the computation correctly. So kind of in the midst of me, like, diving into Ethereum and kind of, like, getting into the community, I was also discovering these zero-knowledge proofs. And this is, like, very heavy-duty cryptography, but they're kind of magical because they allow you to do this really difficult problem. So I'll kind of stop there in case you have questions.
Well, this is the first time we've ever had a guest that brought up something like zero-knowledge proof. So it might not be something that our audience is really too familiar with. Is there, and you gave us an example, but what's an even dumber example of what a zero-knowledge proof is?
I have a dumber example. It's not that dumb, I hope. So there's a story, I don't know if it's fictional or not, but I'm just going to pretend it's real. There was a math professor, and he was trying to find an easy way to explain to people how zero-knowledge proofs work. And he was reading the book Where's Waldo to his son. And they're reading the book, and the dad goes, I see where Waldo is. And the son goes, prove it. So now we're in this, like, perfect example of where zero-knowledge proofs would be useful, because now the dad wants to prove to his son that he knows where Waldo is without revealing the answer, without revealing where Waldo actually is. And so what the dad does is he gets a huge piece of newspaper, such that the newspaper covers the entire book, and he cuts out a small little hole, such that when you cover the book with this newspaper, the little hole reveals where Waldo is. But it doesn't give the son any other clues about exactly where on the page Waldo is. It just lets the son know that the dad must know where Waldo is, because otherwise he couldn't have placed the paper on the book in such a way that it reveals where Waldo is. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but that's not exactly a proof, is it? That's more like...
Well, it's only a proof when the child finds Waldo and then can put the paper up against it and say, oh, my dad was right.
Yeah.
So he still has to find Waldo, though, right?
Well, the dad is trying to prove that he knows where Waldo is. And so if the dad can place this paper such that the little hole reveals where Waldo is, then the dad has proved that he knows where Waldo is without revealing the answer.
Yeah, but isn't it that like if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it actually fall type thing? Like, how do you know it actually, until somebody else finds it and confirms it, how do we know that he's right? Because it's still like the 2 + 3 = 6 thing.
Yeah, I could cut a hole up in a piece of paper and say, yeah, I found Waldo. Here's the piece of paper. But I think what you're saying is that it's a way of...
See, here comes the skeptics.
Actually, no, go on.
I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. So the dad actually shows the son the book with the paper on top, such that Waldo is revealed.
I see.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense. Oh, okay. We just needed the really dumb Waldo example. I understand it. It's a way of showing that you found something without showing any other clues to what it is or where it is, basically. Okay, cool.
So that way, so the logic
That's
is
why
if he
it's called
pulled the
zero.
paper away, it would still be really difficult for his son to find Waldo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's kind of like, I can think of I'm trying to think of all these other ways I could like show somebody where Waldo is now.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, what if you would have to know who Waldo is and what Waldo looks like for that
That's a good point.
to work? Yeah. So if the son didn't know what Waldo was or what Waldo looked like, there wouldn't be a way to prove it. So if I don't know what 2 + 3 = how do
on
you
the cover of the book?
How do you prove it to somebody who doesn't know?
Well, they don't need to.
That's a much more conceptual problem because we're not actually trying to solve for that, though. That's the thing.
So it's mostly like let's say you have a bank account, and you just want to prove to someone that your balance is greater than $1,000.
Okay.
And you can do that. You can say, look, like I have added all of my pluses and minuses in my bank statement, and my final balance is greater than 1,000. So the person you're proving this information to, they don't need to know how to add or subtract. They just need to have a way to kind of run your proof and be satisfied that your statement is correct, that you have more than $1,000 in your bank account. So it's not necessarily of like, can the challenger actually do the computation themselves? It's, can they run the proof?
So this is not something that people usually associate with Ethereum. Zero knowledge proofs that's like kind of a word that comes up with Zcash and other privacy cryptos. So when you going back to your sort of evolution as a blockchain developer, where are we?
Yeah. So I discovered what zero knowledge proofs were. I thought they were super cool. In parallel, I was getting more and more involved with the Ethereum community. So I started giving more talks and going to more workshops and going to more conferences. And there was definitely like this turning point in my life where I was still working full-time at Airbnb, the software engineer. And I remember my manager, he was trying to be like nice to me. And he said, look, do you want to go to Barcelona for like a user research trip? And I said, I'm so sorry, I already have a trip booked to Argentina for a crypto thing. And I realized, like, oh man, like, I feel like I have 2 jobs and I feel like I'm sucking at both of them. So I should just, like, choose one and go with it.
Nice.
So you're going to say something?
That's a really bad feeling when you feel like you can't commit 100% to one thing. I've been in that boat, and it's It does get frustrating after a while.
So then did you go all in into crypto engineering?
Yeah, so I decided to go to crypto full time. And then there was a question of, okay, well, what do I do? And I kind of worked backwards. I said, okay, well, let's imagine in like 50 years or so from now, blockchain is not like this cringe word. It's actually being used as a ubiquitous payment system. Maybe like in 50 years we figured out all the problems with.
Yeah. Well, that's a big bet. That's a big bet if you're not, yeah. But yeah, go ahead. So that was a chance you were going to take?
Yeah, like if you can imagine that world, then maybe people looking back to 2020 might think, wow, like why would you ever want to have your value be tied to so much political drama that's happening? Like your value, your worth as an individual might fluctuate based on what your president tweets, right? Or maybe based on decisions that your politicians have made in terms of like taking, foreign aid or taking financial precautions that you as an individual have zero power over, right? And so, it might actually make sense for a person to think like, wow, it actually really makes sense to have sovereign currency that's without a government that, doesn't make my worth fluctuate based on things that I have.
Kind of like gold.
Kind of like gold.
Which is still highly manipulative. Like, it's easy for countries to manipulate, but not to the extent of it is like their own currencies. So then it's like, well, what are we missing to get to that future? And I kind of narrowed it down to 3 problems that we were missing. So one is stability, meaning that if I buy a banana with Bitcoin, I would feel pretty bad if 5 minutes from my purchase, Bitcoin's price is going to fluctuate 10% plus minus.
Right.
And so that's definitely a problem. The second problem that I identified was scalability. So Visa has something like 65 transactions a second at its peak, and Bitcoin can support 4. So definitely a huge difference. And then the third problem that I identified was privacy. I don't think many people realize just how not private Ethereum and Bitcoin is.
Especially Russian hackers.
Yeah, it's something we actually talk about quite a bit on this show. It's a misconception. Most people interested or who follow cryptocurrency know that most crypto is not. Even the most secure cryptos like Zcash isn't. It's not always a given that your transactions are going to be private. But we've also, and this is something we'd like to talk to you more about, but just know this, that like we've also heard from people who don't necessarily think privacy is a good idea. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that eventually, but keep going on privacy privacy, scalability, and volatility.
Stability, yeah.
And so for the first two, the stability and scalability, at least when I started, there were tons of projects working in those 2 areas. So if you remember, there, especially 2018, 2017, there was a huge influx of stablecoins, trying to figure out ways to peg to the dollar. And then in terms of scalability, I saw a lot of projects working on sharding, and then a lot of projects working on layer 2 solutions. And so for me, it was like, well, actually, I think layer 2s make a lot of sense. And so we don't necessarily have to work on this problem, and we can kind of wait to see how that focus area develops and maybe take some ideas from there in the future. And then for privacy, there were very few projects actually working on privacy full time, and I can kind of go into why I think that is. But when I started, there were Dash, there definitely Coin, there's Monero, and Grin is another that just started happening, kind of when I started to look in this area more. So to me, it was
right?
like, sorry, what?
Beam is another.
That's right.
Like on the Wimble projects, yeah. Wimble projects,
Yeah.
yes. We know all the words, we just don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
Basically, we just need to, figure out how to find Waldo in all these examples.
Yeah.
That's right. But I thought it was fascinating. Very few people were working on privacy. And after doing more research, I realized that the strongest privacy technique that we have available is actually using these zero-knowledge proofs. which is what Zcash is doing. And so to me, it was like such a clear answer. There's this very obvious gap. Whoever figures out how to make a good privacy coin, there's a ton of potential, and it's using like really like technology with these zero knowledge proofs. So that was kind of like how I got to this project overall.
All right. So why do you think that many projects are not working on it?
Privacy is hard. It's a really hard technical problem. And the reason why it's so hard is because the way Bitcoin works right now, for example, if I were to send you one Bitcoin, the reason why that transaction would be validated is because every miner can see that in the past, other people have sent me a sum of at least a Bitcoin, meaning that they can see that my balance is at least a Bitcoin. And so because everything's so public, they can say, look, I can see this transaction. Elena's trying to send one Bitcoin to somebody else, and I can see that that transaction is valid because we know exactly what Elena has. So in the privacy world, if you're trying...
Sorry to interrupt, but basically speaking, Bitcoin sort of... the reason that it works is because it's not private, because everyone can see. So privacy is a big challenge. Okay, go on.
Well, it's a big challenge for basically any cryptocurrency. Ones that are trying to be decentralized and public literally means that any miner can come in and they can start validating transactions. So if it's private and I have this, let's say, like hashed or encrypted transaction, how is a miner supposed to know if this transaction is actually valid or not? And so different protocols kind of go about this way, or go about this problem different ways. So Grin, for example, uses what's called Peterson hashes, and so it's kind of like the concept that like even though something is encrypted, I can still check equality on it. Monero works with decoys, and I don't know how technically you want me to go into, but so Monero basically tries to obfuscate what exactly is mine in the transaction that I'm trying to spend. And then Zcash uses zero knowledge proofs, and they basically say, I can hide my transaction, and I can provide this proof that I basically have enough balance in order for me to send this transaction. So those are kind of like the three approaches that people are using. And I'll pause right here. Do you have questions?
Such a good teacher.
Michael, you have questions? I have some more philosophical ones, but I kind of want to hold them for a bit.
I guess. Oh, so I mean, not really about that, because that's, I think, if you've been in crypto a while, and I feel like in the beginning of our podcast we were trying to steer it towards, crypto noobs, but I'm realizing the vast majority of people who do listen to our podcast kind of understand the space. So I feel like at a certain point we just kind of have to accept that. And
yeah, or at least they say they do. Yeah.
So I get that. Like, I guess from a business standpoint, did you is it like a full on business at this point that you're doing? Is it? I mean, are you?
Yeah. What is your interest?
Is it experimental? Is it? Are you working off of grants? Are you working off of like angel investors? Like, did you pitch this to somebody and say this is what I want to do, or is it like Ethereum Foundation, or like how does that actually work with running a business?
Yeah.
In this space.
Question. So when I first started, we actually did get connected to an investor, and we did get a very small pre-seed to kind of get this project off the ground.
So you built a team.
You're saying we.
Oh, well, we is the very minimum number to say we, so it's me and another person.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a joint venture. You guys both said we're quitting our jobs. We're quitting our work to go into this, looking into making crypto more private, essentially.
Kind of. So I quit my job and decided to go into this thing full time. And I had a friend. So when I used to live in Seattle, I used to work for Microsoft, and I met this person. His name is Dusty. He's an amazing engineer, an amazing human being. And I met him while he was working at Facebook in also the Seattle area. And so we met at a Python meetup, became friends, kept in touch. And when I quit my job, decided to kind of dive into crypto full time, I noticed on Facebook he just made a post saying like he is available for work. He only works remotely from Canada. And so I quickly messaged him and I was like, hey, Dusty, like, crazy question. Do you want to build a privacy blockchain with me in Rust? And I think, and so at the time, because he was in between jobs, I think he was just going to humor me, and he was like, sure. And his only question was, do I have to move? And I was like, no, it's okay. You can stay in Canada. So we are a team by default. Yeah.
So then your business is at the point you're getting in investment money, but what is your goal in terms of products or delivery?
Well, we're still working on actually releasing this chain. So at this moment in time, we've been working at it for a little bit over a year. And so we have kind of a proof of concept that this works. We basically have an internal test net to prove out some of the things that we're working on.
And this is Beanstalk. This is what you're... Okay. Yeah, so let's talk a bit about this. I mean, as much as you can talk about it, I'm sure a lot of it's private, but...
It's actually not private. It's more like I need to publish content on it.
I see. All right.
Yeah, so we basically took the stance of, look, like there is clearly the best privacy technique that we are aware of. It's this technique using zero-knowledge proofs. And part of the reason why, it's not being used as much is because it's actually very difficult to support shielded transactions that use zero-knowledge proofs. So to kind of give you some numbers, Zcash is a privacy coin that uses this technique, but they have two modes of sending transactions. One mode is called transparent, and it's identical to Bitcoin, technically speaking. So they actually forked the Bitcoin code base when they first started, and so their transparent transactions are basically identical to Bitcoin. And then they have these shielded transactions, which use zero-knowledge proofs. Now, if you just look at the stats of how many people are actually using shielded transactions, I think roughly 1% of cash transactions are actually fully shielded.
I heard about that. I was just like, no!
I've actually spoken and met...
compulsory too, right?
Sorry, what?
They're not compulsory. They're like, you have to enable them. Right?
Yeah.
And it's actually very difficult to use shielded transaction.
And it's not on by default. So I think most people don't realize that, right? They just assume, they hear it's private, and so they just use it.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to hit in that sentence. So one is, a lot of people do assume that when they use Zcash, they're using a privacy coin. I've literally spoken to someone who was trying to convince me that they have shielded Zcash, and they proceeded to pull out their phone to show me that they have some private Zcash.
And then showed you their password as they logged in to prove it, to prove they have a password. Oh, okay.
And I basically said, look, the fact that you're pulling out a phone lets me know that it's not shielded Zcash, because at the time, there was no mobile support for shielded Zcash at all. So it's impossible for you to do that. And then he said, wait a minute, but Zuko himself gave me the Zcash, so private. Zuko's the creator of Zcash.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's kind of relevant.
You better get rid of all the guns and cocaine you just bought on the internet with all that Zcash on your phone.
Because Zuko told you it was safe to buy it with.
Yeah.
And the problem is that it's not like a mode, it's not like on Venmo you can just click on a radio button of whether or not you want your transaction to be private or public, although I wish that was the case. It's actually very difficult to use shielded transactions. So in order to use shielded transactions, you have to have a full node. And I think Zcash just is kind of releasing their work on a like, but there's like, in my opinion, still flaws with that design. So
wait, hold on. You're serious? You can't send anything secret, like private, unless you run a full node yourself?
That's right.
Oh my god.
All right, Zcash, you got work to do.
So
Beanstalk,
wow.
kicking your ass.
So to give them some benefit, they are working on a light client, so to support, clients running or having Zcash and still being a phone or being in a web browser. But that is definitely still, in my opinion, work in progress. And the light client solution they have right now has some flaws, to put it mildly. And that's been like a recent development too. But yeah, so traditionally speaking, you have to have a full node to get shielded Zcash. And the reason for that is, for Ethereum, for example, you can have a phone, like a mobile app on your phone, or you can use MetaMask, which is a Chrome plugin. And the reason for that is because you could, like, you as a client can ask a full node what my balance is. So MetaMask, for example, uses a service called Infura, which is basically a service for apps to ask a full node some information about certain addresses. And the reason why that works is because everything's public. So I can say, hey, full node, can you please tell me what my balance is, and here's my wallet. And then the full node will reply and say, this wallet has 3 Ethereum or 3 Ether. Yeah. And when you're in a private environment, you can't do that because that's the whole point. It's private. So you can't ask a full node what my balance is because it doesn't know. And so that's the reason why you have to have a full node yourself to figure out even what your balance is.
Wow.
I see.
Wow, that's crazy. Right. I didn't think I just never thought about that.
So there's a big hole in this market, and that's what Beanstalk is trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Make a push button privacy.
Yeah, so really fast, what is Beanstalk actually trying to do?
Yeah, so we are a new chain, and we only have shielded transactions. So we only have transactions that use zero knowledge proofs.
By default, right.
So now, are you trying to be a currency or something like Chainlink or something like Ethereum where you're, doing other stuff on it besides shielded transactions?
Yeah, good question. So we're not going to have any smart contracts. So I think the killer use case for blockchain is still payments. And so we're really focusing on how do you make payments great and private.
Particularly darknet payments, yeah. So we can talk about that in a second. But anyway, yeah, so Beanstalk, so that's what Beanstalk is doing. When it comes to, I have a question that relates to Michael's previous question about like the business side of things. The business model for going out and creating your own chain and saying this doesn't exist is really, I mean, like right now you have funding to do this, but how do you get paid from this eventually? Is the idea that you create this coin, this asset on this chain that you have a lot of, and eventually it becomes worth a lot of money, and then you can sell that for your salary, or what does it look like?
That's actually exactly it. So we took a lot of inspiration from Ethereum, and they've done a similar model where they started with what's called a Genesis block, and the Genesis block already had balance. So they started with what's called a pre-mine, or I think the term has changed now, but vernacularly it's called pre-mine, where basically the Ethereum said, look, in the first block of our chain, there's already going to be money allocated to some wallets. And so effectively you're basically saying, like, I'm printing money to myself, and that's how the blockchain begins. And you kind of described it really well. So basically we would allocate a lot of coins to ourselves, and these coins don't have any value when we start. And if the project succeeds, and if we succeed in making this project have a healthy network and have participation and distribution, and people care about it, then so would the price go up, and then we would sell those coins to cover operations costs, so like salaries and so on.
Yeah. So we had Richard Hart on with talk about Hex, and he said his biggest complaint about Bitcoin and Ethereum was the miners have to dump on the market just to pay their bills, and that's constantly deflating the price. And as we've seen with Ethereum, like it's just even Vitalik. It's even like Vitalik admitted that he sold at the top.
Though. I mean, that's if you have a project that's funded with Ethereum, right?
No. I'm saying so. Look at Ethereum. Vitalik admitted that he sold at the top. He sold a bunch of Ethereum at the top, and the Ethereum Foundation sold at the top.
Oh, I see.
And the price has been suppressed and just dropping since then.
I see.
And I know like we're on Twitter too much, and the Bitcoiners are so toxic, but that's their biggest complaint about Ethereum, is that it's a scam because of the pre-mine. And my response is always like, well, how is it any different than any business that takes a percentage of their stock for themselves?
Right. To me, it's employees. To me, it's a very genuine way to do business, because it's saying like
it's open and honest and verifiable, and it's like.
I mean, I definitely agree, and it aligns incentives. You're basically saying there's an entire team behind this project, and we're going to maintain it, and we're going to support it. and as such, we are going to pay ourselves with the coins, that results in this project. So I know I've heard those arguments from Bitcoiners before, and I just don't understand them. You have to pay developers something, right?
Yeah.
And where is that money going to come from? It seems the most natural answer is from the project itself.
Yeah,
so
I think that.
So really fast follow up. So then how do you avoid price manipulation like what's happening with XRP and Ripple? Because most people think that the price is so low because they've systematically depressed the price for the last year and a half by selling just, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of it onto the market.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the details there, and this is actually a very difficult question of, how do you sell coins on the market to sustain your business, but also not manipulate or not influence the market. And I don't have all the answers yet, but our incentives as a company would be aligned. We would not want to tank our own price. We would not sell the tokens at the same, all of them at the same time, because that's not a sustainable way to do business.
Yeah.
So I feel by aligning incentives, you can say, look, we don't know the right answers, but at least we're going to, we have good intentions, and we're going to not to tank the price because it's actually in our interest not to do so.
Well, I mean, so most businesses have vested stocks, so you can't sell it within a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. And then if you were open about your salary and you said, hey, we're each getting paid $100,000 a year, so we're going to sell X amount of our coins to hit that number. So now all of our users and all the people supporting us aren't going to be surprised, and we can't pull a Vitalik and sell 30% of our thing just because it hits a high number. That could easily I think most people would be like, oh, well, they're being honest and upfront, and they're verifying this, and so we know ahead of time exactly how much coins are going to be sold based on the price, and so we can factor that in and not have it be a complete surprise. I just think that a lot of people in crypto have been trying to, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying other projects, have been trying to hide a lot of these transactions because they don't want to, I don't know, Charlie Lee, exactly what Charlie Lee did with Litecoin. He decided to sell 100% at the top. Now, if he had said, hey, I feel like this is kind of weird as a CEO to hold such a huge percentage and I can manipulate the price, so I'm going to sell 10% of my holdings for the next 5 years every month. Everyone would know what was going on. It would be very clear. But the way he sold it, he says, oh, by the way, I sold the 100% last week. I don't have any more Litecoin. And then all of a sudden the price goes from $300 to $33.
So Elena, I think one of the reasons this is a big question for us is because we have to look at a lot of projects and kind of decide whether they're scams or not, because there are so many. And I think that finding out how a project makes money and how they use their kind of crypto runway, so to speak, it's you might not have all the answers to this, nor should you, but that's the main reason that we kind of bring this up. And we recently had somebody on the show talking about, the crypto project that they created on Ethereum, and he's getting a lot of criticism for the same thing. It's basically a pre-mine. So
yeah.
But
and this isn't like us, I don't want you to think we're pitchfork attacking you. These are just questions that we just instinctually think of, and so this is the first question we ask any kind of project of oh, how do you pay yourself?
Yeah.
Just only because the last 2 years with XRP and Litecoin jumped out at me, and then also all the ICOs with Ethereum. All the ICO people have been selling their Ethereum just to pay their rents, which is yeah, sure, that's how else are you going to pay your rent? I mean, I get so mad at Bitcoiners because they're dumping all the Ethereum. It's yes, to pay rent on their office. How else? Are you giving them cash? No, you're. So it's what do you expect them to do? So. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in saying we're not sure yet, totally plausible answer, and maybe us saying what we just said will make you think about it a different way. That's all.
So I want to know what Beanstalk, so zero knowledge proofs, that's basically what, is there anything besides that that makes it a special project? Or are you really trying to focus on that, solve that problem, and that's what it's going to be about? And how far along are you?
Yeah, so we have one goal, just to make a privacy coin that works.
It's awesome.
Seems so simple, but like that's a pretty hard thing to do.
It actually is a hard thing to do because, like, what is works? I want to make sure that this is very easy for people to use. Yeah. And I want to make sure that they have the highest guarantee that this is private. They don't need to think about which mode am I sending this in? Is it private? Is it not? What level of privacy does it have? I want user to just have this guarantee that they're using a product that is secure and private and safe for them to use. In terms of like usability side, we have a fasting technique. So basically, how do you sync a full node faster? Because that's really important for privacy coins. And then in terms of how do you do light client support, how do you have auditability, we have what's called view keys. So on every wallet, you can give someone a view key for a wallet, and it does what it sounds like. It gives the holder of the view key the ability to see all the transactions that a wallet has done without being able to spend any of the funds in the wallet. And so this is going to be important for regulation and making sure that all funds are accounted for, and having good bookkeeping and kind of all those things. But yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, like we want to make this a very user-friendly experience. And just be very explicit about what people are using and making sure that they understand that you are using a privacy coin and that they feel safe about it.
Is there a goal you're trying to hit, or what does the light at the end of the tunnel look like right now?
Yeah, so kind of like what I was saying before, it took us a year to get to like an internal test net. So we have like a lot of the stuff working, but it's there's no UI yet, and so it's kind of rough on the edges. And so our next step is actually how do we make this into how do we get to a public testnet so we can get more developers and more people running this thing and making sure there aren't any bugs. And then kind of the step afterwards is like, well, okay, how do we make these like clients and wallets and UIs so people can actually use this easier? And then we have like a plethora of other features. But kind of the umbrella of all those features is that one goal of how do you make a privacy coin that works.
So are you allowed to talk about the back end of is it proof of work, proof of stake, DAG?
Yeah, so we went with proof of work, and I can go into explain why we chose that. But long story short, I still believe that proof of work is still the best strategy for new chains. I know that proof of stake is kind of the thing to do nowadays, and we looked into proof of stake for quite some time, and we kind of came to the conclusion that there are a lot of question marks and a lot of vulnerability concerns with proof of stake, that it's not really worth it for us to go that route.
That's interesting. I mean, proof of work is really under attack right now for being something that destroys the environment. So it's interesting to hear that you have chosen for that as a way to secure the network.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't love the environment aspect of proof of work. I'm not advocating for it, but purely from distribution or fairness or even security and lack of vulnerabilities, proof of work is still the better system to use. Now, kind of like looking further ahead, I'm like paying attention closely to proof of spacetime. So for full disclosure, I'm renting a desk out of an office space belonging to a company called Chia. Chia is a company, a cryptocurrency that is actually trying to make a proof of spacetime chain.
Proof of spacetime.
That's right.
This is the first time I've heard this.
Yeah, me too.
So POST, proof of spacetime for short. It's basically an attempt to replace GPUs with hard drive disk or disk space. So kind of like for Bitcoin, if you dedicate more GPUs or more ASICs to mining Bitcoin, then you have a higher chance of mining that block. Here, you're basically saying the more disk space that you're allocating, the more chance you have of getting that new block. So that's kind of like proof of spacetime in a nutshell. We haven't seen any proof of spacetime kind of implementations go in the wild. And so I'm still like closely monitoring these projects and seeing like how they do in the wild in terms of like vulnerabilities and actually working. But it's a really interesting concept, and it's a very green approach, and it actually has a lot of things done better than proof of stake. So
you mentioned fairness, and I want to touch on that because I think that's one of the things JJ and I have always kind of have had a problem with Bitcoin, is because it's not fair in the sense of you have to have a lot of capital to be able to mine. And even in the beginning, you had to have a laptop, which 95% of the planet didn't have, or 90% of the planet didn't even have didn't have a computer back then. So the idea of fairness of even with proof of space time, so you're saying like the person with the biggest hard drive is going to get the most reward, in essence. So that still comes down to capital. Can you see in the future any chance of maybe proof of time versus you don't have to worry about the space, just how much so even if you only have like a cell phone, you're allocating a certain amount of time every day to use your cell phone to mine, that it's not so much about how much output you're doing, but the amount of time you're dedicating to the project and rewarding people that way?
So I think the fairness thing comes from cost. So how expensive is it for you to have a mining rig for Bitcoin versus having a bunch of hard drives? So in your example with the mobile phone, you could imagine where you can say, okay, my phone can dedicate some disk space. Then the question becomes, well, how do we choose which miner actually gets that block reward for mining that block? And even with Bitcoin now, even though it's unfair, like if you have your computer, you actually have some chance of finding that hash that results in a new block. So it's actually a probability game. It's just that you have pretty bad odds if you're doing it on your laptop versus if you're a mining pool. And so with the proof of space-time with hard drives, it's the same concept of like, well, it depends on just how many hard drives you have. And if you have more hard drives, then you have higher probability of getting that new block. And you can kind of argue that hard drives are cheaper than ASICs. Maybe, I don't know.
Now, yeah, but if Beanstalk blew up, everybody would be going out and hoarding all the hard drives, and that might jack up the price just like ASICs.
At which point you'd have to look at the model, I guess, and see if it's sustainable.
Well, I guess the question is, first off, the idea of fairness. Just because we talk about that a lot on this show, about the because we're both artists and we both took a certain path, and the idea of fair in the sense of like, why does one person have to receive the reward? If 100 people are jockeying to find this thing and they're all putting all this energy into space, why can't they all be rewarded based on how much energy they put into the space?
That's kind of a bigger question for like proof of work as it is right now. But
so technically, mining pools fit your definition of fairness. So in a mining pool, let's say there's a mining pool of 100 computers, and you are one of those 100 computers, and one of them finds this block, and they get a block reward. The way mining pools work is they all actually divide the reward. So when we talk about like centralization in Bitcoin, like we say like, oh, these, this mining pool has like 30% of the hash power for Bitcoin, or whatever that is, you're actually like, if you kind of dig deeper, it's like, well, there are different individuals inside that mining pool that actually benefit from that block reward. So in a lot of ways, I would challenge you saying that Bitcoin is not fair, because you kind of give a definition of fairness that fits mining pools.
Sure. Yeah, but I guess the point is, why couldn't there just be one mining pool?
Well, you do still want some decentralization. You don't want to have one mining pool kind of control how all blocks are created.
Yeah, but if you're the mining pool, if the code is the mining pool, and just every single person is connecting to the code, and the code is decentralized at a certain point, why wouldn't that work? And I love the fact that you're pushing back, because I love I definitely want to These are things I think about, and you're the first person who's actually taken the time to respond. Like, we ask a lot of Bitcoiners on Twitter, and none of them will answer. None of them will respond.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have you back on the show, I think, to talk about proof of work and proof of space time. But yeah, I guess Michael's question is like, in that case, I guess everyone would share the block rewards, right, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to dedicate some of your phone or computer or whatever, and you put in 1% of the output, why, if there was just one mining pool and every single person was connected to the code that you created that was now decentralized, like to say, 20 years down the road, why would it be weird for me to get 1% of the reward if I'm putting in 1% of the energy?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand why you think one huge mining pool would be a good idea. But you're kind of leaving like a single source of vulnerability for your entire chain. Like, if this one mining pool is compromised, then your entire network is kind of in trouble. So I think that it's healthy to have competition, and it's healthy to have diversity. So these mining pools, I mean, there's different software running for all these things. So if one mining pool has like some serious bug or whatever, it doesn't bring down the entire, Bitcoin network.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you need to incentivize too, just to, otherwise you'd have no growth in that way. At least I assume. I mean, yeah, competition would be a good thing. Elena, I've got one more question, and it might be a big one, it might not be. It's about when you have privacy as an innate part of your chain, your network, does that introduce other security problems? We had a guest on this show who actually said he really didn't want, one of the reasons that he kind of moved away from BTC to the other forks was that he didn't want to see Bitcoin become private or enable privacy features, because then he was worried that it'd become easier to steal because you wouldn't be able to see everything. I mean, that's how proof of work works. All the miners can see every transaction, so there's nobody hiding anything. When you have transactions that are private, what are the fears and concerns when it comes to security?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where that person got their information from because BTC isn't strictly moving to privacy. So Bitcoin Core, they have a lot of features that might be kind of like nice cherries on top in terms of privacy.
Let me just say that I don't think that we were talking about BTC moving towards privacy, but it's one of the things that, like, Andreas talks about is like, privacy features will be next in Bitcoin. So I think a lot of people are thinking that BTC will eventually have some sort of privacy. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so to kind of give you a little bit more background there, so Bitcoin right now is looking into something called Schnorr signatures, which will give you some privacy guarantees as a side effect, but really they're mostly used for like space efficiency, because Schnorr signatures allow you to aggregate signatures within a transaction effectively. And so in essence, kind of as a side effect, it might help hide the sender and the receiver. Actually, I think just the sender, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the receiver also. I need to, don't quote me on that. So it's, it's like a very weak form of privacy because, like everything else, is still public. On top of that, Schnorr signatures have been in the works for Bitcoin for years. I think the Blockstream
kind of like Lightning.
Well,
I had to get a little dig in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was first introduced in a Bitcoin forum literally years ago, and I think almost a year ago, Peter Wheel made a Bitcoin proposal to include Schnorr signatures. There may or may not be implementation of this yet, but regardless, it's going extremely slow. So even though we hear Bitcoin moving into privacy, Bitcoin as a feature moves extremely slow. And I'm glad that they do because, it needs to be secure, stable, and so on. So I wouldn't be really worried about Bitcoin making such a drastic change and, making a huge difference. So that's one thing. So the other thing is, this concern of if my chain is fully private, how does a person know that there isn't inflation happening, that there isn't a hacker, for example, that managed to print themselves a lot of coins, and now no one can see that because no one sees the full amount.
Right.
So that's actually a pretty big concern. And actually Zcash and Monero both have had a lot of pushback from people saying, like, if someone did hack Zcash or Monero, we would never know. And so this is actually a real problem, one that we've been thinking a lot about as well. And, the answer there really is, how much do you trust math? Because
if you're an American, not much.
You trust your gut.
You trust your gut. Okay, well then, that one's kind of hard to appease. So technically, with shielded Zcash or Monero or Beanstalk, even though you can't see the amounts, you still have proofs and equality checks that no new money has been created out of thin air. And so if you wanted to add an additional proof that says, no, really no money has been created out of thin air, the problem there is that additional proof would actually have the same security vulnerabilities as the other proofs. And so if one of them got hacked, so to speak, if zero-knowledge proofs got hacked or elliptic curve cryptography got hacked, then so would that additional proof. So at that point, it actually doesn't make sense for you to add that additional proof to begin with, because it would be broken in the same way. And so the argument there is, it's like, well, this cryptography is actually like very solid, and whatever other proof that we will add will depend on the same like security vulnerabilities, and so it doesn't make sense to add that. And for Zcash, Monero, and so on, when we see hacks in these systems, it's not based on the cryptography itself. It's usually some really dumb implementation bug. It's really like the bugs in the code, and not really bugs in these cryptography protocols.
Right.
So really, if you wanted to have a secure coin, you should focus less on the heavy-duty cryptography and more on the stupid bugs that come up in clients.
Double checking the humans who are inputting stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. So why didn't you? Last question with us. Why didn't you build this as like a side chain on Bitcoin
or Ethereum or
Bitcoin
anything?
Core?
Yeah, good question. So for Ethereum, there actually are projects working on adding privacy to Ethereum. One of them is called Aztec, and they're actually soon. So it's an interesting project to watch out for.
What is it called?
Aztec,
Like the Incas and the Mayas, or
That's right.
Aztec.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right, like the Incas and the Mayas.
Okay.
And we actually did look at figuring out how to put privacy in Ethereum first, and the conclusion that we came to is that it would be a pretty bad user experience because, one, the fee, like the gas fees, like the fees to send your transaction would be really high, which is what we're seeing with Aztec, and two, it would be very difficult to actually provide full privacy. So, for example, for Aztec, logistically speaking, it can hide the amounts, but not necessarily the sender or the receiver, because someone still has to pay for that gas. And there is actually a technique to do to basically prepay the gas for the receiver, and there's a lot of other complexity. But technically, logistically speaking, it'd be very difficult to actually hide the sender or the receiver, and so you really are only hiding the amounts. And if we
aren't you doing that with Bitcoin as well, with a fee?
So for Bitcoin, it would be extremely hard to add privacy because there's no smart contracts. So Aztec is possible because it has smart contracts.
Okay. And so you're gonna still have a fee. Like if I want to send you, 10 Beanstalk, there's still going to be a fee, right?
There's still going to be a fee, but to give you kind of a perspective for Aztec, last time I checked, and these numbers might be not out of date, an Aztec transaction will cost you 700,000 gas. And to kind of give you a perspective, an Ethereum block usually has a capacity for 7 million gas. So, you would fill a tenth of the Ethereum block just with one Aztec transaction, and so that's going to cost you.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow, amazing answers. So what do you have a launch date for Beanstalk, and is there what
no pressure.
What do you need from the community? How can we help? How can we be a part of it?
Yeah, so right now, as you can kind of tell, we don't have that much on our website, But hopefully in the next couple months, we're going to be releasing a public testnet. And so this is a way for people to run their own clients, connect to our testnet, send some fake transactions around, read the documentation, make sure that it makes sense to them. So when that happens, I'll definitely let you know, because our goal here is to kind of explain all this tech in a very readable way, because we really want to make sure that our users understand how this technology works, and it's on us to explain it in a way that makes sense. So stay tuned.
Right.
Yeah, and we're the guys, like, because we're constantly calling people out when they're using too much jargon or buzzwords, and average people are like, huh? So it's good that you're doing that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So how do our listeners follow you and keep up to date with Beanstalk and you?
Yeah, well, despite our website being basically blank, we do have a way for you to sign up to our mailing list. And once we launch some stuff, we'll email people about it.
Okay. So mailing list address will be in the, or how to sign up will be in the description. And then and your Twitter, you're on Twitter. Are you active on Twitter?
Relatively active on Twitter, yeah.
Okay. And that's, what's your Twitter handle?
Lean the Bean.
Lean the Bean, LeanThebean. That's it. Lean the Bean, like Beanstalk.
And the website is just beanstalk.com or beanstalk.io or
network.
Beanstalk.network.
Network. Okay.
Network. Well, cool.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Elena.
Yeah, we definitely need to have you back on, because I have too many questions, and you're amazing at answering, and you're the first person who's actually explained the competition of groups, like mining groups, and that really made a lot of sense. We're
probably going to need to do. I mean, I'd love to do another episode where you talk about Monero and how it works, because I have all kinds of issues with Monero. And then the other thing is just it's very hard for us to get Bitcoin BTC developers to answer a lot of our questions, and I feel like you answered like 4 of them. Yeah. Like in this interview. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, let us know if you recommend that we talk to anybody else in the space. Yeah. Anything else you want to share with the listeners or with us or anything?
Oh man, I think I covered a lot. I don't know. Do you have any more questions?
Well, I'm sure we'll get some replies. We'll send them your direction. I'm sure you'll get some new followers and people interested.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Well, with that, thanks everybody. Tune in next week.